The gospel today is a profoundly familiar one. It's one that, depending on our moment in life, we probably love and hate, all at the same time. And it's one that we all probably have appealed to at some point in our lives. The idea of the beam that's in your eye because you're pointing out the splinter in mine. It's a gospel I think probably parents understand in a pretty profound way. Of course, I'm no parent, but one of the ministries that I have in addition to being here at Holy Rosary with you all is as formator at our Norbertine Abbey. And we have 3 young men in formation in their process of pursuing their full incorporation into our community as Norbertines and discerning and pursuing the priesthood. And I like to say that I get to raise them after all the cute and endearing years, and I just inherit them as obstinate elder teens and early adults. But nonetheless, they bring great joy to my life. What it is to walk with them and see them grow and evolve and discover new things. But more often than not, when you're walking with others who are on their journey of life and they're treading through waters that you yourself have been, it's so easy to want to reach out when you see danger lurking. It's so easy to want to give them direction and guidance. But then more often than not, you find yourself having to say, do as I say, not as I do. And I think in many ways, that very reality, when we're called to care for the well-being and the development of another, is what inspires our own journey of faith. I know that's very true in your family. Bringing these 2 little ones here today to be baptized, to know the gift of grace that is the forgiveness of their sins and the unity that they'll know in the body of Christ. And how animating that is in your life when you realize now we're to care for these. And it makes you look at yourself and say, well, then what is my life? Well, one of the greatest compliments and also most challenging things you can hear as a priest is, that was a wonderful homily, Father. Because you like to know that people like your preaching, but there's also a truth that the best homilies are really being preached to the preacher himself. And that's the challenge of recognizing that as pastor, as much as I try to guide us as a community and set our course and be present and responsive to all the spiritual needs of those who worship here at Holy Rosary, I myself am too growing with you in my own journey. And so as much as I'm called upon to observe all the splinters in the world at times, it heightens my own awareness of those beams. Once I look at this gospel, sometimes we can interpret it as a statement of complacency because that's the comfortable place to go with it, right? We say, oh, I shouldn't point out anything that's going on here. I shouldn't intervene there. I shouldn't offer guidance there because, well, my life's so broken and chaotic and screwed up. Who am I to speak? And then we say, well, then I'm not going to judge. I'm not going to do anything. Or when people come to us and confront us about something, then we're also very quick to judge what's happening in their life and say, oh no, I don't need to hear about that. Don't tell me. You don't have your stuff together. Why should I listen to you? Get away from me. The problem is when we use the gospel to justify those realities, to say, I'm not going to try to help you because I need help, or you better not try to help me because you need help, then nothing changes. No one grows. There's no transformation to be had. We sit in a stagnant pool. I don't think that's what Jesus is getting at. What Jesus is calling us to in today's gospel is a profound invitation to solidarity. To recognize that the significance of what it is to see the imperfections that I am carrying, the blindness that I have experienced, the weakness that I have known becomes the doorway for me to help liberate you from the same challenges and crosses that you yourself are carrying. And that's a mutual endeavor. It's in those moments when we notice the brokenness, the imperfection, the area for growth in the other, that we also see it in ourselves. Does it ever happen to you where the thing that drives you most crazy about someone else, when you start thinking about it, you realize you have that same issue? But there's a grace in that. There's a beauty in that, because what God is offering us in those moments of realization is to say that by the act of me trying to grow in my own journey, in this human experience, in my fractured, broken, and uncertain blindness, teaches me so much of what it is to then invite the other to do the same. And at that moment, we're not just pointing out splinters in other people's eyes. We're extending a hand to help remove them. Because we know what it is to pull something of such obstruction out of ourselves. We've done the hard work with God's grace, so we can do it with others. The problem is, I may never notice my beams if other people don't point them out to me. And so this journey of mutual growth, of mutual support, of mutual transformation and conversion requires a profound level of heart and vulnerability, of openness to share, to speak, to listen, to walk with one another. That's what Jesus is inviting us to today. He's inviting us to live out the profound mystery that these two beautiful girls will enter in their baptism, of what it is to be bound so inextricably that we are one body. That your blindness is mine, my blindness is yours, and yet because we are different parts, we see clearly in different ways. And so together we make a greater whole than any one of us could ever be. And that together we find a deeper transformation, a deeper renewal, a deeper conversion, a deeper encounter with salvation and God's grace that in isolation any one of us could ever know. Is it messy? Yes. Can it be confusing? Of course. But you all know those moments in your own journeys, in your own families, in your own friendships, and in our own community here, where we've had to have hard conversations, we've had to hear hard things, and yet if we trusted and acted in such a way that we knew we were seeking something greater, not the casting of judgment, but the inspiration of grace and wholeness and healing, that we found something more profound than we ever could have imagined. It can be uncomfortable. It can be painful. But when we realize we are in that journey together with one another, it also is profoundly liberating. In baptism, as we enter into the death and resurrection of Christ, we are entering into God doing that very same thing for us. Him entering our world so intimately that He lived our life so profoundly that He shared even in our suffering and in our death, so that He could show us the way to the resurrection, to the hope of new life. There's no greater testimony than what it is to lift one's cross, to pull out one's beam, to model that sense of humility, honesty, vulnerability, and openness than we have seen in Jesus Christ. So He has done that for us. He calls us to do that with and for one another. And most especially, He inspires us all to do it for the sake of these little ones that God brings into His own family today.